Welcome back, my friends. Today, we are going to explore one of the most powerful stories in modern history. It is not the story of one king. It is not the story of one empire. It is not even the story of one country. It is the story of a simple game, a game played with one ball, two goals, and people from every corner of the world, every 4 years. Something unusual happens. Streets become quieter. Families gather around screens. Friends sit together in homes. Café, schools, restaurants, and public squares. People wear their national colors. They wave flags. They sing songs. They wait for one whistle, one pass, one mistake, one goal. For a short time, the world seems to stop. This is the power of the World Cup. But here is the question. How did this happen? How did football become more than a sport? How did one tournament become the biggest sporting event in history? And why do billions of people from different countries, different languages, and different cultures care so deeply about one game? To understand that, we need to go back to the beginning. Long before the bright stadium lights, long before television cameras, long before global sponsors, famous players, and millions of people watching online, we need to return to a time when football was still growing. The air was different then. The fields were rough. The crowds were smaller. The sound of the game was simple. Feet hitting the ground, voices calling across open space. A leather ball moving through mud, grass, dust, and rain. Football became popular because it was easy to understand. You did not need to be rich. You did not need expensive equipment. You did not need a special building. You only needed space, a ball, and people who wanted to play. That is one reason football spread so far. A child could play it in a street. Workers could play it after a long day. Students could play it at school. Soldiers could play it during quiet moments. Sailors, marchands, immigrants, and travelers carried the game from one place to another. Slowly, football moved across borders. It entered towns, cities, ports, factories, schools, and neighborhoods. It became part of everyday life. People did not need a perfect field. They did not need perfect shoes. They only needed the feeling of the game, and that feeling was powerful. When a player ran toward the goal, everyone understood the moment. When a team scored, everyone understood the joy. When a team lost, everyone understood the pain. Football used simple rules, but it created strong emotions. That is why it became a language of its own. You could watch a match without understanding every word around you. You could still understand the tension. You could see the hope in the players' faces. You could hear the crowd rise before a shot. You could feel the silence after a missed chance. In many countries, football became the game of ordinary people. It belonged to workers. It belonged to children. It belonged to neighborhoods. It belonged to people who wanted to dream, even for 90 minutes. But at first, there was no World Cup. There were matches between clubs. There were local competitions. There were national teams. Football also appeared in the Olympic Games. But the sport did not yet have one great global stage. There was no single tournament where countries could meet and ask one simple question. Who is the best football nation in the world? That question became more important. As football grew, countries wanted to compete. Fans wanted to compare teams. Players wanted to test themselves against the strongest opponents. The world was changing, and sport was changing with it. Travel was still difficult. Communication was slower. A journey across the ocean could take many days. Teams could not simply fly across the world like they do today. Planning an international tournament was expensive, risky, and complicated. Still, the dream continued to grow. People began to imagine something bigger than a local match, bigger than a friendly game, bigger than a tournament between nearby countries. They imagined a global competition, a tournament where nations could stand together on the same stage, a place where small countries could face powerful countries, a place where football could show not only skill, but also pride, identity, and courage. This dream was not easy. There were disagreements, there were costs, there were doubts. Some people wondered if countries would travel so far. Others wondered if the tournament could survive. The world was not as connected as it is today, but sometimes big history begins with a difficult idea. The World Cup did not begin as the giant event we know now. It began as a dream that football could bring nations together, a dream that a simple game could become a global story, and in the year 1930, that dream finally became real. The first World Cup was about to begin. It would not look like the World Cup we see today. There would be fewer teams, fewer cameras, less money, less global attention. But it carried something very important. It carried the beginning of a tradition that would grow across decades, a tradition that would create heroes, heartbreak, national pride, unforgettable goals, and memories shared by millions of people. At that time, no one could fully know what the World Cup would become. No one could imagine that one day, people in Canada, Brazil, England, Japan, Morocco, Argentina, France, and many other places would stop their daily lives to watch the same tournament. No one could imagine that this simple game would become a mirror of the world. But the first step had been taken, and the story was only beginning. The first World Cup took place in Uruguay in the year 1930. Today, that sounds simple. A host country, a group of teams, a trophy, a final match. But at that time, it was a very bold idea. The world was not connected like it is now. There were no fast flights for teams. There were no live broadcasts for millions of people. There were no social media clips, no instant highlights, and no global football business like we see today. For many teams, going to Uruguay meant crossing the ocean by ship. The journey could take many days. Players had to leave their homes, their clubs, their jobs, and their families. They had to travel far away, to a country many people had never seen before. The sea air was cold at night. The ship moved slowly through waves. Some players trained on the deck, while the wind hit their faces and the ocean stretched endlessly around them. That is why some countries did not want to go. The idea of a world football tournament was exciting, but it was also difficult. European teams worried about the long journey. Clubs did not want to lose their players for many weeks. Money was a problem. Time was a problem. Distance was a problem. The dream was big, but the world still felt very wide. Still, Uruguay was ready. Uruguay was not chosen by accident. The country had a strong football tradition. It had already won Olympic football gold medals. Football was loved there. People followed the game with passion, and the country wanted to show the world what it could do. Uruguay was also celebrating 100 years of independence, so hosting the tournament felt special. It was not only a sporting event, it was also a national moment. The first World Cup had only 13 teams. That number may feel small today. Now, the World Cup has many more teams, from many more parts of the world. But in 1930, 13 teams were enough to begin something historic. They came from Europe, North America, and South America. They did not arrive with the luxury and comfort of modern football stars. They came into a young tournament, filled with uncertainty. No one knew if the World Cup would become successful. No one knew if fans would care for many generations. No one knew if this tournament would survive. The matches were played in Uruguay's capital city, Montevideo. The sound of the crowd filled the stadiums. People shouted, clapped, sang, and waited for goals. The grass was real beneath the players' boots. The air carried dust, sweat, and noise. There was no perfect modern screen above the field. There were no camera angles from every side. There was only the game, the players, and the people watching with full attention. That simplicity made the tournament feel raw and real. Every match carried a new question. Which country was stronger? Which style would work better? Could teams from different continents compete against each other? Football was becoming a way for nations to compare, not only players, but also pride, discipline, courage, and identity. For the players, this was not just a game. They were wearing the colors of their countries. They were standing in front of people who wanted to believe in them. A pass was not only a pass. A goal was not only a goal. A victory could make a nation proud. A loss could bring deep disappointment. This feeling would become one of the strongest parts of the World Cup. The first tournament slowly moved toward its final match. Uruguay and Argentina reached the final. This made the moment even more powerful. The two countries were neighbors. They both loved football deeply. Their rivalry already had emotion, history, and pride behind it. The final was played in front of a huge crowd. People packed the stadium. Their voices rose into the air. Flags moved above the seats. The noise was heavy, like a wave rolling through the stands. For the players, the pressure must have felt enormous. They were not just playing for a trophy. They were playing for history. Argentina started strongly. Uruguay fought back. The match changed direction. The crowd reacted to every movement. Every shot brought hope. Every mistake brought fear. In the end, Uruguay won the final and became the first World Cup champion. For Uruguay, it was a moment of national joy. For football, it was something even bigger. The first World Cup proved that the idea could work. It showed that countries could come together for football. It showed that a tournament could create emotion across borders. It showed that fans wanted more than local matches. They wanted a world stage. The tournament was still small. It was not yet the giant event we know today. But it had planted the seed. From that first World Cup in Uruguay, a tradition began to grow. More countries would join. More fans would watch. More stories would be created. The tournament would face war, politics, pressure, money, fame, and change. But the basic idea would stay the same. One bowl, many nations, one dream, to stand on the world stage and be remembered. And after Uruguay lifted the first trophy, the world began to understand something. Football was no longer only a game played in streets, schools, and local fields. It had become a global story, and that story was ready to grow. As the World Cup grew, people began to understand something important. This tournament was not only about football skill. It was not only about passing, running, defending, or scoring goals. It was also about identity. In a club match, players represent a team, but in the World Cup, players represent a nation. That changes everything. The shirt feels heavier. The flag feels closer. The voices from the crowd feel louder. Every movement on the field can carry the hopes of millions of people. This is why the World Cup feels different. When a player walks onto the field, he is not walking alone. He carries a country with him. He carries childhood memories, local streets, old coaches, proud families, and people watching from far away. Some fans sit inside bright stadiums. Others sit in small homes, with the sound of the television filling the room. Some watch in cold cities. Some watch in hot villages. But for 90 minutes, they feel connected. That connection is powerful. A country may be small, its population may not be large, its football history may not be famous, but in the World Cup, it can still dream. It can stand against a stronger team and believe that anything is possible. This is one of the reasons people love the tournament. It gives small nations a chance to be seen in everyday life. The world often feels unequal. Some countries have more money. Some have more power. Some have more attention. But on the football field, for one match, the rules are simple. 11 players against 11 players. One ball, one score, one chance to surprise the world. That is why an unexpected victory can feel so emotional. When a smaller nation wins against a famous team, people remember it for years. The streets fill with sound. Chars honk. People wave flags from windows. Strangers hug each other. Children run outside in team shirts. The night feels alive. Even people who do not usually watch football may join the celebration. Because the moment feels bigger than sport, the World Cup gives people a shared story. For many fans, the tournament becomes part of family memory. They remember watching with their parents. They remember sitting beside friends. They remember the taste of food on the table, the warm room, the nervous silence before a penalty, and the sudden noise after a goal. These details stay in the mind for years. Football is simple, but memory makes it deep. A child may not understand tactics. He may not know every rule, but he understands joy. He understands disappointment. He understands the face of a parent who is hoping, waiting, and almost afraid to breathe during the final minutes of a match. This is why people cry during the World Cup. They are not only crying because of a ball. They are crying because the match touches something personal. It touches pride. It touches belonging. It touches the feeling of being part of something larger than yourself. For immigrants, the World Cup can carry even more meaning. Many people live far from the country where they were born. They may speak a new language. They may work in a new city. Their children may grow up with a different culture. But when the national team plays, old memories can return. A flag, a song, or a goal can bring back the feeling of home. This matters in countries like Canada. Canada is a place where many cultures live side by side. During the World Cup, different communities follow different teams. One neighborhood may cheer for Canada. Another may cheer for Morocco. Brazil, England, Japan, Argentina, France, Portugal, or another country. Cafes become louder. Streets become more colorful. People who speak different languages can still understand the same emotion. Hope does not need translation. A goal does not need translation. A heartbreak does not need translation. That is one reason the World Cup became global. It speaks to people in a way that words cannot always do. It gives nations a stage. It gives fans a reason to gather. It gives ordinary people a moment to feel part of history. But this national pride also creates pressure. When a country expects victory, players can feel the weight. One mistake can be remembered for years. One missed chance can become painful. One loss can make a whole nation quiet. The stadium that was full of songs can suddenly feel heavy. The air becomes still, faces look down. People turn off televisions without speaking. That silence is also part of the World Cup, because the tournament gives joy, but it also gives pain. It gives pride, but it also gives pressure. It gives dreams, but it can also break them, and that is why people keep watching. The World Cup feels real, because it has everything: hope, fear, pride, failure, surprise, and memory. It shows us how much a simple game can mean when a nation believes in it. Every 4 years, countries come to the same stage. Some come to win. Some come to prove they belong. Some come only with a small dream: to survive one more match, to score one unforgettable goal, or to make their people proud. And sometimes that is enough, because the World Cup is not only about who lifts the trophy at the end. It is also about the stories created along the way, the unknown player who becomes a hero, the small country that refuses to give up, the fans who travel across the world, the child who watches one match and falls in love with the game forever. This is the heart of the World Cup. It turns football into identity. It turns identity into emotion, and it turns emotion into history. The World Cup became powerful because of nations, but it became unforgettable because of moments. A tournament can have rules, teams, stadiums, and schedules, but people do not remember schedules for long. They remember faces. They remember goals. They remember mistakes. They remember the sound of a crowd before something important happens. They remember moments that feel larger than life. This is why the World Cup creates legends. A player may work for many years in a club team. He may win many matches. He may score many goals. But one World Cup moment can change how the world remembers him forever. One goal, one save, one run, one pass, one celebration, or one mistake can stay in history for decades. That is the strange power of this tournament. It is short. It happens only every 4 years. A player may get only one real chance. If he is injured, unlucky, or too young, the moment may pass. If he is ready, brave, and calm, he can become part of football memory forever. The pressure is enormous. Imagine walking into a stadium filled with thousands of voices. The lights are bright. The grass is green beneath your feet. The air feels heavy. Your shirt sticks to your skin. You hear drums, songs, whistles, and shouting from every direction. Somewhere far away, millions of people are watching. Then the ball comes to you. For 1 second, everything becomes quiet inside your mind. You do not think about history. You do not think about newspapers. You do not think about the millions of eyes watching you. You only see the ball, the space, and the goal. Then you act. That one action can become history. This is how World Cup legends are made, not only through talent, but through timing. The right player, the right match, the right moment, the right pressure. Names like Pelé, Maradona, Zidane, Messi, Ronaldo, and many others became connected with World Cup history because they gave people images they could not forget. But the World Cup does not only belong to the most famous stars. Sometimes, it also belongs to players who were not known around the world before the tournament began. That is one of its greatest strengths. Every World Cup has surprise heroes: a goalkeeper who saves a penalty, a defender who blocks one important shot, a young player who scores at the perfect time, a team captain who refuses to give up, a substitute who enters the match and changes everything. These stories make people keep watching, because in the World Cup, history can happen at any minute. A match may seem normal for a long time. The ball moves from side to side. Players run, pass, wait, and defend. The crowd makes steady noise. Then suddenly, everything changes. A mistake happens. A player breaks free. A shot flies toward the goal. The net moves. The stadium explodes. People jump from their seats. Drinks spill onto the floor. Hands cover faces. Strangers shout together. In homes across the world, families scream at the same time. A quiet room becomes full of sound. A simple goal becomes a memory that people tell again and again. That is why the World Cup lives beyond the final whistle after the match ends. People keep talking. They talk at work. They talk at school. They talk in cafes, buses, homes, and online. They ask the same questions. Did you see that goal? Did you see that save? Can you believe what happened? The match becomes a shared memory, and shared memory is powerful. For many people, the World Cup is not only about what happened on the field. It is also about where they were when it happened. They remember the chair they sat in. They remember the weather outside. They remember the people beside them. They remember the feeling in their chest when the final minutes arrived. Some remember joy. Some remember heartbreak. Some remember both. This is why old World Cup moments never fully disappear. They return in stories, videos, interviews, and family conversations. A father tells his child about a match he watched when he was young. A grandparent remembers a famous goal. A group of friends remembers the night their country won, or the night their dream ended. In this way, the World Cup connects generations. A tournament from many years ago can still feel alive because people keep retelling it. The players grow older. The stadiums change. The shirts change. The style of football changes. But the emotion remains. That emotion is the real archive of the World Cup. Not only statistics, not only scores, not only trophies. The real archive is in people's memories. This is why the World Cup became part of global culture. It gave the world stories that were easy to understand. A small team fighting a giant, a great player carrying a nation, a last-minute goal, a painful defeat, a comeback that seemed impossible. These are not only sports stories, they are human stories. People love them because they show courage under pressure. They show hope when time is running out. They show the pain of failure. They show the beauty of trying again, even when the whole world is watching. And that is why the World Cup can reach people who do not watch football every week. Some viewers may not follow clubs. They may not know every player. They may not understand tactics deeply, but they understand a dream. They understand a country hoping. They understand a person standing under pressure. They understand the joy of a moment that arrives after years of work. The World Cup makes those feelings visible. It turns them into images, a player falling to his knees, a goalkeeper raising both hands, a coach crying quietly, a crowd holding its breath, a child watching with wide eyes. These images stay with us because they feel honest. They show people at their most emotional, not polished, not perfect, just human. And as more World Cups were played, more memories were created. Each tournament added new chapters, new countries, new stars, new surprises, new heartbreaks, new stories for the world to remember. That is how the World Cup became more than a tournament. It became a collection of memories shared across the planet, and once television and media began carrying those memories into homes everywhere, the World Cup was ready to become something even larger. It was ready to become a true global event. For many years, The World Cup was already emotional. It already had nations, flags, crowds, heroes, and unforgettable moments. But one thing changed everything: television. Before television became common, most people could not see the World Cup with their own eyes. They could read about it in newspapers. They could listen to radio reports. They could hear stories from people who were there, but they could not watch the drama unfold in front of them. That made the tournament feel distant for many fans. A great goal could happen in another country. A famous victory could change football history. But for people far away, it lived mostly through words. They had to imagine the stadium. They had to imagine the sound of the crowd. They had to imagine the speed of the players, the movement of the ball, and the feeling of the final whistle. Then television brought the World Cup into people's homes. This was a turning point. Suddenly, a family did not need to travel across the world to feel close to the tournament. They could sit in a living room, gather around a small screen, and watch countries compete in real time. The picture might not have been perfect. The sound might not have been clear. But the feeling was powerful. The World Cup was no longer only an event for people inside the stadium. It became an event for people everywhere. Imagine a small room at night. The lights are low. A television glows in the corner. A family sits close together. Outside, the street is quiet. Inside, every face is watching the same screen. When the ball moves near the goal, no one speaks. When the shot comes, everyone leans forward. Then the crowd on the television rises, and the room rises with it. This is how media changed football. It carried emotion across distance. As broadcasting improved, the World Cup grew even bigger. More countries could watch. More languages carried the same matches. More people learned the names of teams and players from places they had never visited. The tournament became a window into the world. For many viewers, the World Cup was one of the first times they saw other nations so clearly. They saw different flags, different songs, different faces, different styles of play. Some teams played with speed. Some played with patience. Some played with physical strength. Some played with beautiful passing. Each country seemed to bring its own personality onto the field. Television made those differences visible. Then color television added another layer. The green field looked brighter. The shirts looked stronger. The flags looked more alive. The World Cup became easier to remember because it became easier to see. Later, satellite broadcasting made the tournament even more global. A match played in one part of the world could be watched almost immediately. In another part, the World Cup was becoming a shared event for millions, then hundreds of millions, and eventually, billions of people. This growth changed football forever. Players became international stars. A young fan in Canada could admire a player from Brazil. A child in Japan could know a team from Argentina. A family in England could watch a match from Mexico. A student in Morocco could follow a player from France. The World Cup made the football world feel smaller, but media did more than create famous players. It created stories. Before a match, television could show the background, the history, the rivalry, the pressure, the injury, the dream. The camera could show a nervous fan, a serious coach, a player singing the national anthem, or a child holding a flag with both hands. These images helped viewers care. A match became more than two teams chasing a ball. It became a story with characters, tension, and emotion. People wanted to know who would win, but they also wanted to know what victory would mean. Then came the internet. The World Cup became faster, louder, and more connected. Highlights could travel around the world in minutes. A goal could be watched again and again. Fans could discuss matches online. People could argue, celebrate, complain, and share emotion instantly. Social media made every moment bigger. A mistake could become famous overnight. A celebration could become a symbol. A young player could become known around the world after one great match. A fan reaction in the crowd could be shared by millions of people. The World Cup had become more than a sporting tournament. It had become a global media event. Sponsors, brands, television companies, and online platforms all understood its power. The tournament attracted attention like almost nothing else. Businesses wanted to be part of it. Countries wanted to host it. Cities wanted the world to see them. Broadcasters wanted the rights to show it. Money became a major part of the World Cup story. This created new opportunities, better stadiums, better broadcasts, more global access, more professional organization. But it also created new questions. Was the tournament becoming too commercial? Was money changing the spirit of the game? Could football stay close to ordinary people while becoming such a large business? These questions still matter today. But even with all the money, technology, and media attention, the heart of the World Cup remains simple. A player runs, a ball moves, a crowd waits, a country hopes. That is why people keep watching. Technology made the World Cup bigger. Television brought it into homes. The internet carried it into phones. Social media turned moments into global conversations. But technology did not create the emotion. It only helped the emotion travel farther. And once that emotion reached every corner of the World Cup became something more than sport. It became a global experience. But now, the World Cup had become more than a football tournament. It had nations. It had legends. It had television. It had global attention. It had memories that crossed borders and generations. But the deepest reason people love the World Cup is not only found in stadiums, trophies, or famous players. It is found in human feeling. The World Cup became bigger than sport because it touches dreams that almost everyone understands. The dream to belong, the dream to be seen, the dream to win against the odds, the dream that, for one special moment, your country can stand in front of the world and be remembered. This is why the tournament reaches people who do not watch football every week. Some people do not follow club matches. They do not know every player. They do not study tactics. But when the World Cup arrives, they watch. They choose a team. They follow a story. They feel the pressure. They understand the emotion. Because the World Cup is easy to enter, you do not need to know everything about football to understand a country hoping for victory. You do not need to know every rule to feel the silence before a penalty kick. You do not need to know every player to understand why a last-minute goal can make people cry. The language of the World Cup is simple. Hope, fear, joy, pain, pride, memory. These feelings are universal. In one country, a family may watch together in a warm living room. In another, fans may gather in a crowded street. In another, people may sit in a cafe, surrounded by voices, flags, food, and nervous laughter. The places are different. The languages are different. But the feeling is the same. Everyone is waiting for something to happen. A pass, a mistake, a save, a goal. That waiting creates tension. And tension keeps people watching. For English learners, this is also why World Cup stories are powerful. The words can be simple, but the ideas are big. A match can teach words like courage, pressure, victory, defeat, nation, dream, and unity. These are not only sports words, they are life words. The World Cup also teaches us about the world through football. People learn about countries they may never visit. They see flags they may not know. They hear names from different cultures. They notice different playing styles, different songs, different celebrations, and different ways of showing pride. In this way, the World Cup becomes a kind of global classroom. It shows that the world is large, but connected. It shows that cultures can be different, but emotions can be shared. It shows that people may speak different languages, but they can still understand the same moment. This is especially meaningful in multicultural countries like Canada. In Canada, many people come from many backgrounds. During the World Cup, one city can hold many dreams at the same time. One family may cheer for Canada. Another may cheer for Italy, Morocco, Brazil, England, Japan, Argentina, France, Portugal, or another team in the same neighborhood. Different flags can hang from windows. Different songs can fill restaurants. Different communities can celebrate the same tournament in their own way. That is part of the beauty of the World Cup. It does not ask everyone to be the same. It gives everyone a place to feel something. But the World Cup is not perfect. No global event is perfect. It has faced questions about money, politics, fairness, pressure, and power. Some people worry that the tournament has become too commercial. Some worry about the cost of hosting. Some worry that the beauty of the game can be lost behind business and fame. These concerns are real. But even with these problems, the emotional power of the World Cup remains strong. At its center, there is still a simple game, a ball moving across grass, players trying their best, fans holding their breath, nations hoping for one more chance. That simple center is why the World Cup survives. It began with a dream that football could bring nations together on one stage. In 1930, that dream was small. Only 13 teams played. The world was less connected. Travel was difficult. Many people did not yet understand what the tournament could become, but the dream grew. It grew through great matches. It grew through unforgettable goals. It grew through television, radio, newspapers, the internet, and social media. It grew through children watching their first match. It grew through families sharing memories. It grew through fans who waited 4 years for one more chance to believe. Today, the World Cup is one of the biggest sporting events in history because it gives the world a shared story. For a few weeks, people look in the same direction. They talk about the same matches. They remember the same goals. They argue, celebrate, hope, and suffer together. That is rare in a divided world. Maybe that is the real lesson of the World Cup. A simple game can connect people. A simple ball can carry history. A simple match can become a memory for a lifetime. So, when we ask how the World Cup became the biggest sporting event in history, the answer is not only money, media, or famous players. Those things helped it grow, but they are not the heart of the story. The heart of the story is people who play, people who watch, people who hope, people who remember. The World Cup became great because it made the world feel connected, even for a short time. And sometimes, that is enough to make a game become history. Thank you for listening to this story. What did you learn from the history of the World Cup? Write one simple sentence in the comments. You can write, I learned that football can bring people together. Keep listening, keep learning, and I will see you in the next story.